Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Jaya Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda Radhe. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Gaur Premanande. Jayom Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivrajakacharya Ashtottara Sati His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravindha Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Ki Jai Shri Shri Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman Ki Jai Shri Shri Nitai Gauranga Ki Jai Shri Bhaktivedanta Manor Gurukula Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I'm very happy to be with all of you who are connected to the Gurukul in the Bhaktivedanta Manor in London. Although this time I'm connected to all of you virtually rather than physically, nevertheless, I'm happy that I can be with all of you. I do know how challenging the last 1 year or so has been, particularly because of the COVID pandemic. I think even though the COVID pandemic has hit the whole world, UK has been particularly affected. And I believe you've had a second wave or maybe a third wave, I don't know. So it's really quite a testing time for all of you. Many devotees I know have themselves been afflicted with COVID at some point, and they have recovered. Some unfortunately could not recover. So it has been a very difficult period for all of you, especially in the UK. Not only from the point of view of dealing with the disease when you have it or someone you know around you, close to you, has it, but also the fear of getting it, and then the restriction placed on our activities and movement. It gets to be really taxing. It's not easy at all. Personally, for me also, I've been here 1 year in my room, although I do go once a week to our farm community, farm project, and I do go occasionally to the temple, but nowhere near the kind of activities that we used to have before that. And what I'm going through here is only a small percentage of what all of you are going through. But the other side of it is that you have an opportunity to really go deeper into your Krishna consciousness. This is one thing that devotees world over have been saying, they have been experiencing, that essentially the kind of intensity with which they have taken to Krishna consciousness and the kind of opportunities they have had to hear and chant about Krishna and to associate with devotees, even if it's not physical, has been quite extraordinary. And many devotees actually have reported that they have felt the Krishna consciousness actually progressing because of the pandemic. So that's quite ironical, but somehow the other, that is how it has been. And I do hope that whilst you've been taking care of your health and your other responsibilities and services in life, that you have also been able to take care of your Krishna consciousness and been able to chant and hear and read and associate and do whatever services you can. Now, we have the Gurukul family here, family in the sense of the parents of the children, those who are supporting the Gurukula, and naturally the teachers, the faculty, and everyone who is serving directly in the Gurukula, and definitely most importantly some children as well, I believe. So I want to just tell you how valuable the service what that you're doing is. Srila Prabhupada on numerous occasions mentioned how important this was. At one place he said it is the most important project in ISKCON, but sometimes he said that for book distribution or he said that for other things. So, but then he did say also that it's one of the most important projects. Srila Prabhupada gave a lot of importance to education, especially in the early years. And he said that whatever is learned in the early years of life will not depart for one's whole life. So therefore, this must be done very carefully. And through the Gurukul, one actually shapes the future generation, not only of devotees and preachers, but also this is actually the great hope for our movement and indeed for the rest of the world. And that those children who are part of a Gurukula project, they are actually the most fortunate. In this way, Srila Prabhupada time and time again has emphasized how important this project is. And like every other project and like every other endeavor in the material world, this project has also not been without its challenges. I am aware to some degree, not very extensively, but at least to some degree, about the kind of challenges that all of you have faced over the last several years. And I want to assure you that you have many, many other devotees, even if they're not here on this call today, who actually support your project, who feel for you, and who want you to succeed, who want you to continue. So, one of the important things in our Krishna consciousness is that we should not let adverse situations dishearten us or discourage us. On the contrary, devotees, being very intelligent, utilize adversities for some beneficial purpose. They they convert adversities into opportunities. So, therefore, even now in this period, even though it has indeed been very challenging because the children are also confined to their homes, and it's hard to just keep them locked up all day long like that. But still, I'm sure that there have been some of the other, benefits that have come out of it. Prahlad Maharaj has himself explained the importance of Krishna consciousness in the life of children. And he has said that this is actually the heart of education, the heart of true learning. We are all familiar with the verse, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakhyam Atma Nivedanam. So this is the famous verse in which Prahlad speaks about the ninefold process of devotional service. Now, whilst this verse is very famous, the verse immediately following it is also very important, wherein Prahlad says, Iti punsarpita Vishnu bhaktis chennavalakshana kriyeta bhagavatyadha tanmanye dhitam uttamam. He said that it is my opinion that for those who follow this ninefold process of devotion in all sincerity, this constitutes the highest learning. Adhitam uttamam. So adhita means the process of learning or education. Uttamam means the best. So Krishna consciousness is the essence of education. It is the perfection of education. It is the purpose and the goal of education. It is indeed the purpose of our very life. And education begins from a very, very young age. In fact, our scriptures tell us that it begins even before, the child is born. It begins from the time when the child is in the mother's womb. That is when the process of education actually begins. And it continues on all the way till the point of death. And then we continue again in the next life, unless we are fortunate enough to become pure devotees, and then we will be taken back to the spiritual world. So Prahlad Maharaj has told us that somehow or the other, if we can keep our children Krishna conscious, then their life is successful. You have completed your duty of educating them. Now that doesn't mean that when we say that Krishna consciousness constitutes the perfection of education, that we don't teach them anything of this world. That is also a misconception. Education in a holistic sense comprises both study of spirit and matter. It has the spiritual dimension and the material dimension. And if you include one but not the other, then there will be an imbalance. The material education in modern life is only focusing on matter, on the material dimension of learning. And they give no understanding of the spiritual dimension of life. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada spoke rather uncharitably about the modern educational system, which eventually makes people faithless and takes them away from Krishna. On the other hand, if we are speaking about spiritual education, and we only teach them chanting Hare Krishna and some basic activities like that, which is excellent, which ultimately even just chanting Hare Krishna can make us perfect. But becoming perfect in Krishna consciousness takes a whole lifetime, actually many lifetimes. So therefore, because it takes a whole lifetime, we have to know how to live within this world. At one point, Srila Prabhupada said this: we must also teach our children history, geography. They must also know about the deserts and the rivers and the hills and the valleys, because we don't want our children to be fools. We want them to understand the material planet on which they live. Similarly, they should know some history. They should know languages like English, and he mentioned Sanskrit also. And they should know arithmetic, things like that. So Srila Prabhupada, whilst he focused so much on Krishna consciousness as the essential part of education and the purpose of it, he also did not underrate the importance of the material dimension, which is essential for one to continue in this world and live a wholesome life. So one must, even the Ishopanishad says the same thing, that one must have knowledge of Vidya and Avidya, of knowledge as well as ignorance. Anything material is considered ignorant relative to the spiritual point of view. So one must have knowledge of both these things. So education is not simply something that is obtained only at home. It's obtained in the Gurukula, in the school. It's obtained in the temple. It's obtained in the circle of friends that the children are associating with, and in the larger world outside. So it is a very cumulative, comprehensive process. Now, we can't control everything that the children do, especially as they grow older. So one has to ultimately give them such a strong protection on all platforms, material, spiritual, emotional, intellectual, etc., that the children will be able to withstand the rigors and the challenges and the temptations of the outside world and the troubles of the mind. Even adults, all of us see, in going through this 1 year, we've faced enormous challenges, not just with the body, but also with the mind. We've been reading newspaper reports about how mental health has been a great casualty during the COVID pandemic. We tend to focus only on the physical illness, but people have been going through a lot of mental health issues because of all these COVID-related problems. So therefore, to somehow or the other give that holistic care to the children is very important in the course of practicing your own Krishna consciousness. Now, how does one manage oneself? We're talking of how to manage the children, how to keep them inspired. But before that, the question is, how do we keep ourselves inspired in Krishna consciousness? And of course, we have access to the internet these days, and we can log into classes and kirtans. We can meet up with devotees online. So these are some benefits. At the same time, excessive reliance on electronic media may not always be the best, and certainly it's not a good example to set for children. So the best thing to do is that every home can become a little temple, and it should, as Srila Prabhupada has said. So in every home, if there is arati and kirtan at least once, if not twice a day, and some little discussion from the scripture, and some form of basic worship of the deities at home, and where possible to physically associate with devotees and go to the temple and offer services, that is fine. But creating that kind of atmosphere at home will keep us all enlivened in Krishna consciousness. So the children will also participate in this. So keeping them engaged somehow in Krishna conscious activities and also in other kind of beneficial activities at the physical and intellectual and mental platform will be very, very nice. If the situation opens up and you're allowed to take them out, you can take them for some trips together, either to the temple or to some other place, and you can have all sorts of programs there for them, especially. There are some things that I've been telling many of our Grihastha devotees and also those involved in education. I came across a quote from Srila Prabhupada which emphasized the need for teaching through pictures. And it so happened that I have also been speaking about this via the Krishna art book. I think all of you are aware of this book. It's a very big, thick book. It's very big and thick, and it contains very glossy, high definition, at least I hope they're high definition, pictures of the paintings that were made by devotees during Srila Prabhupada's time and also after that. And these pictures are magnificent, and they are excellent via media for connecting to Krishna. And they also serve as very superb objects of meditation for devotees. And I've been promoting this book a lot, especially during this COVID time. You know, children, they like to see things and they like to hear things. So the visual medium is also very important. So there's one devotee here in the place where I stay, and he, in his spare time, he conducts programs for children in his area twice a week for 2 different groups. And he has as many as 75 children coming in each group, 75. And he was doing so nice. I was so happy to see his preaching that from the temple we actually gifted him a Krishna art book. You know, and we told him that every time you have your class, just keep that book up there on a table and just open up the pictures one by one. And every day you can speak about 1 or 2 or 3 of those pictures. And you can narrate the story that is depicted in that picture. And the effect that this had on the children was extraordinary. The children couldn't have enough of it. And they were always looking forward to the next time they would come and they would see these nice big pictures, and then they would hear the stories associated with that. And then even in the day, they would, whenever they got time, they would come there and they would ask for the book. So he kept the book in a place where it was semi-public. And the children would just come and all day just flip the pages and just keep looking at the pictures and marveling at the pictures. And they would excitedly come there in their groups and point out certain things in the picture. So they were kind of meditating on these pictures. You know, personally, I have noticed also that these pictures are so helpful that when you read the Krishna book, or you read the Bhagavatam, or you hear of Krishna's pastimes, then you immediately visualize those pictures, those BBT pictures. So this is an excellent way for adults as well as for children to keep focused on Krishna. And these pictures are so exquisite, and the children completely just got enamored. And they just go and look at those pictures again and again and again. They don't get tired of them. And in this way now they've reached almost halfway, not even less than halfway through the pictures. So they've been trying to preach through that art book, and it's so effective. So I would also encourage all of you to try that in your own homes, maybe in the Gurukul if that's possible. I don't know if you have the Krishna art book there. Do you have it there? You know which book I'm talking about? It's a big book like that, thick book. It's published in India. I don't know if BBT UK or Europe publishes it. And even if that is not available, there are these posters and all that, And so for us, whenever you feel down because of COVID, physically, mentally, whatever happens, or even after COVID is finished, just remember these pictures. Just keep looking at these pictures. You can sit for your japa in front of these pictures, depicting the various pastimes of Krishna. And it'll really be very, very inspiring, and it's an excellent stress buster as well. So for those of you who are able to get hold of some pictures like that, you can make your own albums or something. Maybe take it from the internet, get some printouts, or do something like that, and that will be really nice. Another thing that will really help the children and the adults is stories. I often tell the devotees who have children, young children, that they should tell at least 2 stories every single day to the children. And if you have to tell so many stories, then the parents also have to read. Otherwise, how will they be able to keep up with the demands of the children? And the children actually, they have become so addicted to the stories that they won't let the parents sleep until they've told them some stories. Krishna conscious stories, stories from the scripture, otherwise beneficial stories as well. So these things help the adults as well as the children to rise beyond the anxieties and the restrictions of modern day life as it is in the COVID period. So by the oral medium and by the visual medium, the children and adults alike can actually feel great happiness. And also engage in some practical exercises. Take care of your health by doing some yoga, some pranayam. If it's possible to go for a walk, go do that. Keep yourself active. Whenever you get a little depressed or feel a little down or something, just chant the holy name, have some kirtan with the devotees, look at the pictures, go out and have a breath of fresh air. In this way you can tide over this difficult period. I want to conclude by just telling you one story. Because children like to hear stories, and stories of this sort are very, very instructive and very engaging. So one time, many years ago, in a Gurukul, 2 of the children, they finished their studies, and it was time for them to go home. So as was the custom, they approached the Guru in the Gurukul and asked him what kind of dakshina they could offer him. As you know, the dakshina is something that the student gives to the teacher out of gratitude for what the teacher has given. So the teacher said, okay, for dakshina, I want you to do one thing. I want you to go into the forest that is behind our Gurukul and bring me back a whole big bundle of dried leaves that are not useful for anyone. So the two boys immediately rushed into the forest behind the Gurukula, and they came and saw a huge pile of dried leaves that were placed in a field near a tree. So immediately the boys rushed there and they wanted to pick up the leaves. So there was a man nearby, and he had been raking up these leaves. He had a rake and he was picking up all these leaves, and he said, wait, don't do that. I need the leaves, because I'm going to place these leaves in my field, and they're going to crumble, they'll be turned to dust, and they'll become excellent manure. They will enrich my soil. So this is very precious for me. Plus, when I water my plants, then I use it as mulching. You know what mulching is? Mulching is when you place dried leaves and grass and twig, so on, around the tree or the plant, on the soil around, so that it stops the water, the moisture in the soil from evaporating, and it holds the water. So you need less water, So I use it for my mulching, and I also need it to enrich the quality of my soil. So these dried leaves are very precious for me, so you can't take it. So then the boys went on, and then they found another pile of dried leaves in the forest, and they saw that a bird was picking up one leaf at a time and taking that leaf to its nest, and it was building up its nest. And when the children approached, the bird, in great anxiety and fear, looked at them as if to say, please don't take these leaves away, because I need it to make my home. So the children understood that. So they didn't touch those leaves. Then they went further ahead. They saw a small pond there, and there was one dry leaf that was just floating in the water. And they said, surely this leaf is of no use to anyone. So as they approached the leaf, then they saw that there were two ants on that leaf. And when the two boys extended the arms and they touched the leaf, the ants responded as if in panic, and as if to say that, look, it's only because of this leaf that we have survived in the water, otherwise we would have drowned and died. So then the boys refrained from lifting that leaf. So in this way, wherever the boys went, they could not find any dried leaf that was not useful for anyone. So then they went back quite disheartened to their guru. And the guru asked, so you didn't bring back any dried leaves? So the boys said, well, actually, you asked us to bring back dried leaves that were not useful to anyone. But we did not see any dried leaves. We saw lots of dried leaves, but we did not see any leaves that were useless. There was always someone, or some human or some animal or bird or insect that had some use for it. So therefore, we beg forgiveness. We could not follow your instruction. We could not give you your desired Guru Dakshina. We couldn't bring you any dried leaves. So the Guru was very pleased. He said, actually, I'm very pleased with this Guru Dakshina. I have nothing to do with leaves. But through this exercise, you have understood how everything, even the smallest of things sometimes in life, can be so valuable. So how much more useful is your own human body, your own human life? It is the only life in which you can become Krishna conscious, in which you can love God. So even if a simple thing like a dried leaf has so much value, how much more value you should attach to your human form of life and then use it nicely in the service of Krishna. So don't waste your life. Now as you will step out into the world, then you will have many challenges, many responsibilities and duties. So remember to perform them for the pleasure of Lord Krishna. And keep in mind that this is ultimately your perfection of life to please Lord Krishna. So utilize this life for what it is really meant, to serve Krishna. So in this way, this was the parting lesson that the Guru gave to these two young boys, who then graduated and went to their homes and carried on with their life. So in this way, I just give you one example of a little story that you can tell the children every single day. And as I mentioned earlier, it is absorbing not only for the children, but even for the adults. Because you have to read, you have to hear, and then you have to narrate. And then because of that, you remember these things. So the Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Smaranam happens. Hearing, chanting, and remembering is wonderful absorption and meditation. And you add to that the pictures, and you add to that the kirtans and the worship of the deities at home and the other regular services, then surely, whether it's the COVID period or not, you can happily carry on with your life, and you can also engage your children very nicely in this. So once again, I want to thank all of you for your association with the Gurukul, whatever be the role in which you have been assisting the Gurukul, whether as a teacher or whether as a support, as a supporter, whether as a parent. My congratulations and gratitude to you for keeping alive the Gurukula project, which is so dear to Srila Prabhupada. So please do not lose heart, continue on. So thank you very much. I leave the floor open for questions. I am 3 minutes over time, if that is okay. Okay, Hare Krishna. So I think I can leave the floor open for questions. Hare Krishna. Well, I would suggest you can begin with Srila Prabhupada's books. We have the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and we have Nectar of Devotion. We have Prabhupada's lectures. So in all of these, you'll find so many stories, and so there's literally hundreds of stories that you can tell just from Prabhupada's teachings, from his books and his lectures. So you can split them up. If it's a long pastime, you can split it up into 2 or 3 sessions. For example, depending on the age of the children, the detailed story of Dhruva Maharaj or Prahlad Maharaj, or there are so many other pastimes in the Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The second category would be kind of stories which you hear when you learn the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, or the stories of Lord Jagannath. How you must have heard from so many devotees in so many lectures. Perhaps in your yatras to the holy dhams, you've heard these pastimes. So the stories of all the pastimes of Krishna in the various holy places, and the histories of various temples and holy rivers, and things like that. And then the life stories and teachings of great acharyas, the six Goswamis, for example, or Ramanujacharya, for example. So we combine it. So if you start looking at it, there are literally thousands upon thousands of stories like this. And then you can also go for stories which may be not directly devotional, but which may have some instructive lessons, because after all, as I mentioned, education comprises not only direct devotional service, but also to make them worldly wise and teach them about how to live in the world. So there are so many wonderful stories which are not directly devotional, but which are illuminating and instructive. You have so many fables and folk tales, for example, which have very nice lessons. So we can tell those stories as well. In that way, the children, they hear stories, which are of different types. And sometimes you include the philosophy, but you put stories and you illustrate philosophy with stories. In that way, the philosophy becomes digestible to the children. They can understand it. It's also helpful for our preaching skills, because we understand how to present things. One of the skills of a preacher is to know how to present things that are appropriate for an audience, for a given audience. We won't obviously speak in the same way to varying audiences. So how does one present the subject to different audiences? So to the children, it's a challenge, because you have to keep them engaged. You have to keep their attention, because the attention span of children is very short. And you really have to work at keeping them engaged. So if you look at all these stories and you start making your little notes and so on, I'm sure there's so many books available. Just make a listing, make your own listing of stories. And I'm sure you'll come, over a period of months or years, it will come to thousands and thousands. And sometimes you can repeat the stories, because they won't remember every single story. So, like that, this is some suggestions that I can give. Thank you. Yes, this is the wonderful thing about hearing about devotees. The pastimes of great devotees are on the same platform as the pastimes of the Lord, because both are on the transcendental platform. Krishna is never alone. The very fact that devotees exist is proof that Krishna doesn't like to be alone, even though he's Atma Ram, he's self-sufficient. Because Krishna wants to relish the exchange of rasa with his beloved devotees. So therefore, when Krishna performs his pastimes, there are always devotees who are involved as well. So when we hear of the pastimes of devotees, naturally Krishna is involved as well. So there are so many wonderful pastimes of great devotees. So that will also be very useful. There's a question here that how can I keep inspiring myself to persist with reading and hearing, because it's difficult to do that with the lack of association. Well, you can electronically get association now. Thanks to technology, you can do that. And what many devotees do is that they chant together on internet. And they get together and they meet. They have fixed times where they have japa. They also discuss Prabhupada's books together. So if you do it together with devotees, then you will see it becomes much easier. Yes. Yes, there is time, you can ask. Okay, so your question is that as children of devotees grow up and enter their teens, then should we enforce Krishna consciousness on them or let them go and do what they like as they please? This is a difficult question to answer, and I'm sure each devotee will answer this differently, because everyone has a different approach to such things. But I think one thing everybody will agree on is that it will need a combination of the two. By combination, I mean that some degree of freedom has to be given to the children, but it can't be unlimited freedom. There has to be some kind of restriction. They should know that there's some norms that they have to follow. And it should be done by education, by inspiration, by good guidance, by affection, and all of that. And It'll vary from case to case. Different natures of children and parents are all different. So I don't think we can give a very standard answer to that. But there has to be a combination, and you have to titrate it to see what kind of combination works well in a given situation. I hope that helps to some degree. Yes, yes, it's quite clear. Yeah. So your question is that when you're telling these moral type of stories to children, uh, can we also tell them stories that are not of Indian origin but are from other lands, especially where you live? Most certainly. Most certainly. Things like Aesop's fables and other stories. I don't think there's any harm at all in telling these stories. The fox and the grapes, and grapes are sour, and they learn so many lessons of worldly wisdom from that. Folk tales. There are many nice tales that we can tell them. So most definitely we should tell them stories from everywhere. They can learn folk tales from Africa, from Japan, from Native Americans, or from anywhere. So long as they are nice, interesting, instructive stories, and the story does not conflict with our Krishna consciousness, then it's fine. So the criterion that I would suggest is the story should be directly favorable to Krishna consciousness, or it should be at least neutral. By neutral, I mean that it shouldn't say anything that is opposed to Krishna conscious conclusions. By neutral also, I mean that it could be about worldly wisdom, about other good instructions on how to live in this world, and so on. So you can definitely delve into stories from other lands. And why just England? You can delve into stories from so many lands. And that will broaden the horizon of the students. But there should be a blend. We must keep the focus on Srila Prabhupada's teachings as the main diet of stories, and the others can be occasional. This is what I feel we could do. So the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and so on, and even the pastimes, from our tradition, our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, and even the Vaishnava tradition in general. So that will be the first priority. And then a little bit of these other stories time to time. That would be helpful. So I hope I have answered your question. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay, if yeah, two questions. Yes, yes, yes. Um, I, I think by observation. Your question is how to identify the child's interests in various fields like music and so on. By observation. Children will automatically gravitate towards something that they have a natural affinity for. And sometimes because they may not be exposed to a certain activity, and that may come only later. So then after some years, they may um, exhibit an affinity towards that. So it may not be possible from a very, very young age to understand the child's interests in totality, but you can get some idea. So it's important that the teachers and the parents and everyone around the children observe the children very carefully. Observe, I don't mean that you have to be in the face, so to speak, of the child, but you have to see what kind of things interest the child, and you make a judgment based on that. And gradually, maybe when the child is exposed to various other bona fide activities, then that will also become clear. The second question. So your question is when the children are very young and they're very restless and they keep moving around, and how does one engage them? Well, I think Grihasthas will be a better place to answer that question. But anyway, keep them engaged somehow, and if you have more than one child, then you keep each other busy. So that also helps. Otherwise, the parent has to sit with 24/7 with them, and see, they also get tired of just having the parents with them all the time. They want someone of their own age to play around with. So engage their energies, channelize their energies appropriately in whatever interests them. Give them tasks to do, involve them. In that way, somehow or the other, just if you keep them engaged, then they'll be okay. And make it fun for them. Okay, so thank you.